One of his first ever tournaments. We were told that this is his second round of best of 3. So first tournament, probably hasn't had a chance to hit those locals yet, but you know, running a team like he is with that Calyrex Ice Rider and DD Smeargle, a little bit Trick Room heavy, those teams can be very unpredictable, which could be a challenge for Abdullah.
Yeah, I think if you're in a situation like William here, I guess the first thing to keep in mind is like Abdullah is basically in the same spot when he won this event, right? So
yeah.
It can happen. We've seen it happen. But also, yeah, I mean, you kind of want to be a little bit more like high variance offense maybe on your team. If you do feel like maybe you're at an experience disadvantage where it's something where, hey, if you get a couple turns really right, you can kind of quickly win a game. But on this other field, you kind of see Abdullah's team, which is a little bit more methodical.
You say a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and say a lot of it, as this is one of the best Terrapagos teams, I think, to have been built in the Regulation G format. You have Fluttermane with speed control and taunt, which can really mess up Trick Room teams. You have Heatran with Magma Storm, which we'll probably have a chance to talk about a little bit later. Incineroar, this is more of a support set with Knockoff and Will-O-Wisp, really tough for Calyrex Ice Rider players. And of course, you know, Rillaboom, Ogerpon, great Pokemon, but that Terrapagos itself, it's that slower variant with Substitute and Calm Mind, wants to stay on the field, wants to get those boosts, wants to heal its health, and really just be a thorn in Williams' side, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really neat too, as we've seen this format in its second go around here. I felt like Terrapagos is kind of in a bad spot as we left the World Championships, or even though it had gotten second place at last year's NAIC, it just kind of felt like they kind of hit like a dead end in Terrapagos planning, and this version of the team is very different, right? We did not see the Heatran on that team or the Cornerstone Ogerpon back way back when, and it really makes the team play differently. So excited to see that a little bit once we get into the match.
I mean, talking about teams playing differently, you do have the Calyrex Ice Rider alongside of Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is a core that's kind of been around since the start of Regulation G, but you have all of these different support options for it. Ogerpon Heartflame, I think, is the most unique pick here, as typically it is also Cornerstone that likes to hang out with the Calyrex Ice Rider, so you have the sturdy ability, you can redirect and then hopefully keep it around for an Ivy Cudgel or two after Trick Room has been set up. And DD has Heal Pulse, that's a little bit of a unique adaptation, and of course Decorate Smeargle. It can just boost up the Urshifu, boost up the Blood Moon Ursaluna, Calyrex Ice Rider, even the Ogerpon. This is a team that's very unpredictable, and I feel like Abdullah is really going to have to feel out how William wants to play this team before he's going to be able to respond like a player who runs a more balanced type archetype would like to play.
Yeah, I mean, I do really feel like the teams kind of reflect the relative tournament experience of the players here, where this one's a little bit all gas, no brakes, and that does sometimes work, right? You know, I think you probably don't want to get caught in a long, drawn-out game with a player who's had potentially a lot more experience than you have. I think Smeargle in particular is a lot of fun here. There are some options the other side, especially the taunt from that Fluttermane that could be a problem for it, but Spore is always really scary, and Decorate, one of the most fun moves in the game, able to boost up a Pokemon stats through Protect.
And really, as long as you're able to go for that turn 1 Follow Me and then Trick Room, maybe turn 2 if we see a Fake Out in the lead, you don't necessarily worry about your Follow Me user getting taunted, as you can always switch the following turn, and chances are once speed is on Calyrex's side, it's going to be able to underspeed and just KO. And with a lead of the Smeargle and the Calyrex Ice Rider for William versus the Terrapagos and the Rillaboom, that might be what we see. Turn 1, take it a little slow. Turn 2, twist the dimensions.
Won't imminently have to worry about any taunts, but there is the Fake Out option from this Rillaboom, and we see the Terrapagos on the field as well. As you mentioned before, this is the slower version of Terrapagos, so likely looking to set up a substitute at some point, which would help it avoid that Spore, and then boost up with some Calm Minds to really dish out a lot of damage. Should be a lot of fun in that regard. And then with the Rillaboom here, you know, you'd assume with a Trick Room team here, decent chance that perhaps Incineroar is also in the back, so maybe a little slower style here from Abdullah with 2 potential Fake Out users.
Yeah, but that's exactly what you want to do against a Trick Room player like William. You want to be able to slow the pace of the game down so you can fit in those Calm Minds, so then once the Twisted Dimensions are back to normal, you just Terrastalize Starstorm and take everything out. Interestingly enough, though, no Follow Me's, no Protects. We just get a double Fake Out here from both the Rillaboom into the Calyrex, and now the Smeargle into the Terrapagos. I would say most importantly breaking the Terra Shell ability, but with leftovers and with the grassy terrain active, it's going to get those 2 health points back quite quickly.
Yeah, I talked a little bit earlier about kind of how you team build around Terrapagos, and I feel like Rillaboom is almost a mandatory inclusion for exactly this reason. That Terra Shell ability helping out kind of like Dragon Knight's multi-scale to reduce damage when you are fully healthy, and very helpful here with Grassy Terrain to negate things like that Fake Out.
And we have U-turn now from Rillaboom, allowing Abdullah to switch it out into their second fake out user. It is going to be the Incineroar now. Intimidate won't be too helpful right now because the clear amulet is still equipped to that Calyrex Ice Rider, but that's something that could change very quickly. Terapagos goes for the substitute now, will be able to defend itself from Spore on the Smeargle, which is exactly what comes into play. It fails. And now Calyrex Ice Rider does get the benefit of Trick Room on the field, but with Abdullah having substitute up and fake out available to them, it's going to be a pretty tough ride for that Calyrex Ice Rider.
Yeah, it is. Kind of potentially another tournament could get handshaken a little bit here with neither side really being able to progress too much, and that's mostly to Abdullah's advantage. You do want to still, start weakening these Pokemon that enable the Trick Room setup so it doesn't just happen again once it expires, but that's always what you want to see if you're facing against Trick Room, right? Trying to get them in a situation where even though they have the speed advantage, it's difficult to actually press it, and with Terapagos and that substitute up, kind of going to need, maybe an attack both from the Calyrex as well as a Spore to really slow it down, and lots of options on Abdullah's side not to let that happen.
Yeah, to be fair, Incineroar is not holding a safety goggle, so that could have been a target for Spore. We could have also seen William try to decorate that Calyrex Ice Rider, but instead will switch out into the Choice Band Urshifu, which can attack through Protects moving forward. So a good Pokemon to have on the field later. For now, though, Terapagos goes for its first Calm Mind of the match, going to be boosting up its special attack and special defense by 1 stage.
Yeah, so the Urshifu getting out here is, I think, a really nice switch. Kind of as I mentioned, you don't want to just get your Trick Room stalled out. It now becomes much more challenging just to, play passively. We do see the Terra Shell reactivating for the Terapagos there. Just enough healing with the leftovers in the grassy terrain to, I think, get exactly enough HP. And I think that could make a big difference here where that will potentially help protect the substitute. Really want to be able to break that in one shot.
Yeah, and I think the other dangerous thing that William has to watch out for this turn is Abdullah does run Will-O-Wisp on this Incineroar as it's not holding an Assault Vest, so it can go for those supportive moves. And if Will-O-Wisp connects here with either the Calyrex Ice Rider or that Urshifu, that's going to be huge damage mitigation in favor of that Terapagos. So very safe for Abdullah to keep using Calm Mind, go for those burns, try to connect him against William's two main attackers. The big question for me is how does William get around that threat?
Yeah, it's a tough spot, right? Something's going to have to get burned here.
Yeah.
I think double targeting Incineroar is super viable. It looks like we tried and perhaps didn't succeed.
Yeah, unfortunately for Calyrex, that high horsepower did not connect with the Incineroar, but depending on how it was trained, that might have not even been a knockout. Will-O-Wisp will connect, reducing its attack power moving forwards. Wicked Blow into that Incineroar as well. Is guaranteed a critical hit, but it's not going to do a lot of damage and will be hurt by Rocky Helmet in return. Now this Terra Starstorm is single target, will attack into that Urshifu, and that is a clean KO.
Ooh, that's a great turn from Abdullah and really tough for William there. And as you mentioned, they miss on the high horsepower. Unfortunate there. I think it probably would not have been a one-hit knockout, and I guess even if it had, it's still a pretty good trade for the Abdullah side of the field. But the way it played out is just wonderful for him. Gets the knockout, gets the burn on the opposing restricted Pokemon. Really seeing the value of this version of Incineroar as well, where typically tends to be a little bit more passive. And I think on this team where, it's hard to think of Will-O-Wisp as like being like an aggressive attack exactly, but it does cause the Incineroar to pull a little bit more pressure, or a little more attention toward it, where ignoring it, you get punished a lot harder than you do with the average Incineroar moveset.
Yeah, and that's exactly why Terapagos is benefiting from this field position right now, is that there is so much pressure to focus on that Incineroar to stop the burn. Terapagos is free to, as we saw, go for a knockout. With the Ursaluna Blood Moon on the field now, this does shift the damage from physical to special, so certainly don't have to worry about getting burned. Unfortunately, though, with Terra Shell still active on the Terapagos and that +1 special defense boost from the Calm Mind, it hardly does any damage, even though it can attack through the substitute. Knockoff onto the Smeargle will remove the Focus Sash, and now a second Terra Starstorm from this Terapagos connects with the Ursaluna. It's able to hold on, but it is still a very uphill battle for William.
Yeah, it's a tough spot here where all the Pokemon on William's side of the field now in some way have been really encumbered. The Calyrex still nearly at full HP, but burned, and now these Pokemon are both greatly weakened. Trick Room nearly expiring, and Terapagos has helped continuing to go the wrong direction here as it just barely avoids getting its Terra Shell active once again with the grassy terrain expiring.
And now as well that all of William's Pokemon are at that critical less than half health point. We see that Abdullah Abdullah is considering terastallizing, being able to switch from a single target to a double target attack here would ensure a double knockout this turn, regardless of Trick Room, which I think is the most impressive thing for me in this matchup, is that the speeds haven't really affected any of this match at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a great thing about a team that's as bulky as Abdullah's, right? You know, if none of the Pokemon are going to get knocked out anyway, it doesn't matter what order they act in typically, other than, the effect of something like a burn. And even there, it, just dodge the attacks, and then it doesn't matter if the Pokemon's burned or not.
Yeah, for sure. So Incineroar will be leaving the field for now, as it has honestly done more than enough in this matchup, and it will be the return of that Rillaboom in its place, resetting the grassy terrain for Terrapagos' benefit. And we will see the Terrapagos now go for a terastallization. I had to pause there a moment because I forgot that apparently you cannot terastallize when you are behind the substitute.
Yeah, you're gonna get it out of the way there. I mean, the pretty much larger, I guess, in this form, so you don't want to break the first substitute. I was going to say,
is it going to swap out into a larger substitute now?
No, same size substitute, so substitute might have to be a little bit mobile here to block the entirety of this now much larger body. And we do see the deck rate come in. Okay, so this could be a lot of damage going the other direction, and Williams' last hurrah here, going to need to do some serious damage to stay in this one.
Also, a good thing to note as well with Trick Room up on the field, that Smeargle is going to be slower than the Ursaluna, so that it can go for that decorate boost prior to it attacking. Terra Starstorm, though, it is now a spread move. It is now going to get a double KO, and it will just be that turn Calyrex Ice Rider in the back for William.
Yeah, a really tough spot there. Decent damage to the Hyper Voice, I think certainly quite a bit less than perhaps you're hoping for in this particular situation, but maybe doubly so here now because that substitute is not broken, right? So not only is this Terrapagos have a Calm Mind and still reasonably healthy to face down a burned restricted Pokemon, but also the first hit at best is just going to break that substitute, looking very over here in game one.
It does make me think just how William will adapt to the strategy going into game number 2, because I feel like Abdullah played this very by the book. You have your 2 fake out users, you prioritize Rillaboom first, so you have the terrain set for Terrapagos, you have the leftovers there, you ensure that you get your Calm Mind in addition to the substitute when needed. I feel like if William has played this type of team before, that would kind of be okay. I'm going to assume this, I'm going to react to this. And just seeing how this game 1 played out, I wonder if the adaptation is just maybe play the Smeargle a little bit differently. I'm kind of surprised we didn't see him go for those decorates earlier on, especially since he was avoiding Follow Me. He was avoiding Fake Out. Yeah,
I really agree. And I think it's kind of a fun matchup for us to analyze. I think William's team is sort of the sort of team that you tend to like to play, and Will's team is the sort of team that I like to play. So we're kind of like both putting ourselves, I feel like, in the position of one trainer or the other. To me, I felt like William played a little bit too slow.
Where
that's fair. I kind of like... Abdullah needs to get knocked out of his pattern in order to lose a matchup here where, if you can just play conservatively, that's what you want to do with a team like this, right? You want to try to avoid taking too many risks, and I think, to me, it kind of just feels like William probably hasn't played a whole lot against players of Abdullah's skill level, and I think to do that, you've got to take a little more risk, you got to play a little quicker, you can't just do your flow chart because your opponent knows that and is going to react appropriately, where, like you mentioned, I think I'd like to see decorate quicker, I'd like to see riskier scores, where I think you just got to have to roll the dice a little bit to try to get a bigger advantage, because just trying to trade conservatively isn't going to work.
I think that honestly, that's something about this Terrapagos team that applies universally. I feel like if you try and trade with a Terrapagos team that is focused on protecting the Terrapagos, giving it time, you're always going to be trading for not the Terrapagos, which then Terrapagos is still there. You can't necessarily terastallize in front of it. I do like to call out the fact that this Calyrex Ice Rider is a water Terra type, so it couldn't have terastallized to get to avoid the burn, as I know some people like to run fire there for that particular reason. But overall, I agree. A little bit riskier play from William, focusing on those harder hitters a little bit more aggressively. We also didn't see the Indeedee at all, which would have been great to take away the grassy terrain, just seeing how much that allowed the Terrapagos to stay on the field even more.
Yeah, I think I want to see Indeedee, because I think it's both that and then also the ability to follow me the burns away. Winding up that situation where both these Pokemon can't get burned, so we're in trouble now. Was not a great position to wind up in. I think having that option. The downside is Indeedee is you're thinking all right, more offense. Indeedee is not exactly the right fit for that situation, but maybe a better option potentially than just going, bring the same 4 Pokemon and just hoping you can aggressive your way out of it. I think if I think about it from ABDULLAH's side, when I'm playing that sort of team, to me, usually it's the first few turns that are really important where once you get set up, it's really tough to break what Terrapagos is trying to do. And I think, you've got to break the positioning early, especially as you mentioned with the terrain there, right? Where like if Terra Shell's going to activate, 3 or 4 times over the course of the match, you're simply not going to win, right? Unless you're taking a knockout every turn, which is just not super viable against this sort of team. So yeah, I'm hoping for something just like a little more aggressive here with William. Hey, it's a tough draw. You don't want to play against a former regional champion in the second round. Being on stream is scary. So I'm really empathetic in that regard. But yeah, I think if you want to try to pull this one out, it can get a little bit crazy here.
I gotta say, just to kind of look at things through a bit of a larger picture as we wait for these players to lock in their teams for game 2, I'm honestly surprised to see Abdullah lock into this particular team. I do think it's the best Terrapagos team in the format right now. I think that having Magmastorm on Heatran so you can trap your opponent's Pokemon on the field so they can't switch is really a cool tech that Terrapagos can take advantage of. But I know I was personally expecting it to see a little bit more of it at EUIC a couple weeks ago, and the fact that we didn't and the fact that we're seeing it here now is just something interesting I wanted to note.
Yeah, it's weird. I kind of wonder if it's like Terrapagos is kind of just like a player preference thing, maybe.
Yeah.
It's really hard to predict tournament over tournament. I think we didn't see a whole lot of it at Worlds either, despite like doing so well at NEIC. And I just said that there's kind of ups and downs that don't necessarily reflect its strength or like current tournament performance. So I guess I'd be curious to hear what many of our competitors have to say about that. But for now, Terrapagos has entered the field, trying to prove once again why it should be used more frequently in the video game championships.
Lead play style. We're seeing the same exact teams that we saw in game number 1, which means there's probably going to be a play style difference here.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot of fun, right? Where, again, I just don't think playing it out the same way as the previous time is likely to work out for William, but he does have some neat options here. We see the fake out coming out here first, so likely going to see, no fake out this time. So what's the switch up?
So it could be Spore or it could be Decorate. So it's a 50-50. And 50% of the time, it's going to be Decorate.
Yeah, because I would have gone for the Decorate here because you're expecting potentially a substitute from Terrapagos. And I think if you Spore into the substitute, then that's just a complete disaster.
Yeah, I agree.
This is still not like awesome. Like if you're William's side there, we're giving up the 3 Calm Mind isn't great, but it does give you a much more interesting situation potentially than last time, where I think Smeargle likely going to need to sacrifice itself here, but potentially, with the combination of a Follow Me and a Trick Room, this time you get Trick Room up maybe with a boosted Calyrex instead of a neutral one, and then also Smeargle getting knocked out, maybe not the worst thing in the world either, because that would lead to a free switch, and you'd get the full 5 turns of Trick Room with 2 offensive Pokemon out and ready to go. Yeah,
Smeargle, even though it does have Decorate and Spore and could find utility on the field for longer than just the first couple turns of a match, I do think that William wants it to get KO'd this turn. And fortunately, it's a very easy adjustment for him to just click Follow Me now and just accept that it's going to go down. But instead, it looks like no Follow Me here. We do get another U-turn, so Abdullah following the same exact procedure that we saw him follow in game number 1, sending in the Incineroar now, going to be able to threaten those Will-O-Wisps and those knockoffs once again once we get through this turn. But what I find, again, really interesting here is that he did double target the Smeargle, but I want to know what William tried to go for. Was it another Decorate? Because that would have been insane.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. It was either Glacial Edge or no Trick Room. So Terra Shell going to protect the Terrapagos here, and it should still deal pretty good damage.
This changes things, though, because now the Incineroar is going to be slower than a potential Urshifu coming out on the field. And this single strike Urshifu does have close combat. It is choice banned, so I think you have to play around the fake out pressure this turn, but you could potentially stop Calyrex from getting burned.
Yeah, I wonder if I like this better.
I think I do.
You do avoid the burn that way, as you mentioned, where Smeargle would have, if it survived, would have had to find some means of dealing with this Incineroar anyway. And yeah, now Urshifu, a very scary Pokemon to face down for both of these Pokemon, going to kind of require the full attention of Abdullah now, potentially. But also, there's a +2 Calyrex sitting right next to it, right? So again, we have the 2 big threats next to one another. The speed control is a little bit different than we expected, but maybe having the 2 Pokemon sandwich in the middle on William's side either way, where I think maybe Incineroar last is probably better than Incineroar first, given the problems of the burn. So not quite the adjustment I was expecting, but thinking about this more, I really like it.
Yeah, we get our first terrestrialization of the set here from William. We'll be locking in that dark typing for the Urshifu single strike. A little bit scary.
Good for the Sucker Punch, probably in the Terrapagos, trying to knock it out before it can be hit and return.
Just missing out on that KO. Terra Starstorm now will connect with the opposing Urshifu. Is able to hold on with 1 HP. Unfortunately, though, Will-O-Wisp will find its mark against the opposing Calyrex. It is a little bit better off than it was last game, as it does already have +2 in attack from Decorate, but that is still going to weaken the Glacial Lance, but it is going to do enough to pick up the knockout on the Terapagos now. So Calyrex Ice Rider does get an attack boost for its trouble, thanks to the Chilling Neigh ability. And honestly, with this Incineroar so low, I think as long as you can land a high horsepower against it, that's going to be a KO.
Yeah, and I think kind of an interesting way to get to this position, right? But,
yeah.
in the end, Calyrex does have boosted attack still, right? +3 levels of attack, but more like +1 because of the burn, reducing its base attack stat. And, you know, it's definitely a better spot for William, right? We'll have to see if it's a winning position, but one of the downsides of this team is you do not have a lot of offense outside of the Terapagos. It's very important, as we mentioned, to get rid of that Terapagos early. And unlike that first game, this time William does disrupt the defensive synergy, the ABDULLAH side of the team, and now we have 2 supportive Pokemon aiming to support one another, but you know, with how weakened this Urshifu is, both Rillaboom's fake out potentially, as well as a Grassy Glide looking to threaten a knockout.
Well, here's the interesting thing here. William did switch out that Urshifu for the Ursaluna, so he brought the same 4 Pokemon in Game 1 that he brought in Game 2. And we do see ABDULLAH predict the switch and go for the fake out into the opposing Calyrex Ice Rider, and the Incineroar is able to knock off Life Orb. And normally I would say, well, that's unfortunate for that Ursaluna, as it's going to be doing less damage, but it's also not going to be taking recoil damage. And I feel like because of that, and just given this board position, I almost feel like that works out well for William.
Yeah, I guess one of the nice things about William, too, is with spread attacks of both these Pokemon, he may not have to do a whole lot of predicting for the rest of his game. It's like, they kind of could just hit buttons. I do think the Rillaboom is pretty scary. You're not going to want to take too many attacks from this Calyrex, which does have super effective damage available and is sort of kind of a boosted attack. But, you know, Ursaluna definitely not going to want to get caught at the end with this Rillaboom. And on William's side, it's going to be pretty difficult to try to get a cheeky Trick Room off here. But ABDULLAH's going to go for the Terastallization here. Rillaboom not afraid of this Calyrex, going to go on the offense.
I was going to say Terra Grass Woodhammer is probably ABDULLAH's second most powerful attack behind that. Terapagos does miss out on the knockout for this Calyrex. However, it does look like it's in position to be KO'd by knockoff, as it is still holding its held item, which means that is the full base power. And that's exactly what we see happen. Ursaluna, though, still free to go on the attack here, has Blood Moon, and that is the attack it picks to pick up the KO onto that Incineroar. So now both of these trainers are down to their final 2 Pokemon, and I think the big thing to keep an eye out is how many turns of Grassy Terrain are left.
Yeah, I mean, that helps. Oh, no,
yeah,
okay,
it's
that could be a big deal.
I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, because I was going to say, the problem with this is like, okay, well, but you still have to knock out this Rillaboom, right? I think still a somewhat huge problem. We cannot see a Blood Moon on this turn because it was used on the previous turn, and I think we like to see a situation now where the Ogerpon goes for a Follow Me. Rillaboom knocks out Urshifu and then gets caught with this with this Ursaluna on the following turn with it, where it can press its type advantage. But this game's going to come down to a close one. After that first game was a blowout, this is going to be a pretty tight finish.
It's all going to come down to predictions here.
So it doesn't matter. Never mind.
Yeah,
easy.
So
no Sucker Punch, just easy knockout.
No Sucker Punch. Ogerpon is able to pick up the KO on to the opposing Urshifu. That is going to mean that the opposing Ursaluna will be the target of this Woodhammer. And even without Grassy Terrain, potentially even without that Terastallization, that will be enough to pick up the KO there. And even though it got a little bit dicey towards the end, ABDULLAH was able to find a way to win this set 2-0 against William Yee, our defending Vancouver 2023 champion, already making his mark in today's tournament.